We've reached the summer months here on the PGN Par 4. I'm Matt Gajtka with Zac Weiss. And Zach, I'm not sure golf has ever been more interesting or controversial to talk about. Maybe a rare moment in the game's history where it can honestly take center stage in a sports broadcast or a news broadcast at the moment. And I've seen both over the past couple of weeks with the debut of LIV Golf last week in London and now moving right into the U.S. Open conveniently. Golf's certainly hot right now, and I guess for reasons both good and bad. If you do take a wider angle look at things.
Yikes! Just what an emergency podcast for four shots we have here. We were expecting to maybe prognosticate a U.S. Open winner. Maybe we're going to discuss about who won, and then this whole LIV thing came about, and it's come on in quite the big way. And agree with it or not, it has definitely been very, very interesting in a lot of different aspects. And there are aspects I know that we're going to be touching on within mere moments here, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. We will get to the U.S. Open at the Country Club, one of the five founding clubs. Yeah, we will. We'll get there eventually. One of the five founding clubs in USGA history. And of course, where golf made its first significant mark on this side of the pond with Francis Ouimet's win as an amateur more than 100 years ago in the first U.S. Open in Brookline outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So, yeah, we'll meander our way over to one of men's golf's four majors, and arguably the most important tournament in a lot of players' lives when it comes down to it, at least American-born players. But first, a tournament that had no precedent, no history, but at the same time, plenty of newsworthiness. And that was the London Invitational at Centurion Golf Club outside of London, England. And it featured a 48-player field as LIV Golf took off and started its 8-tournament run in 2022. And if you haven't been following the news, I highly doubt it if you're watching this, but just to give you a little bit of a background, this is the former Saudi Golf League and still backed by the Saudi Arabian government's public fund. So this is money coming directly from a regime that, to be quite honest, has scored among the lowest grades in the world in human rights, and not a government, even though it's officially ally with the United States, that I think a lot of people want to be affiliated with. But, and it turns out, Zach, when you have bottomless pockets, you can make a lot of things happen. And while I am excited about the possibility for change in men's golf and in golf in general here, certainly some reservations on my part. I know I wrote the column on Pittsburgh Golf Now about how if the Saudis are given the money, then I'll certainly take it and try to put it to good use here. But I understand, and to use Phil Mickelson's word yesterday, I respect people who would feel otherwise and wouldn't want to go that far. So what were your first impressions of, just to start off here, the first tournament for LIV Golf, which featured, of course, Phil and DJ, the biggest mover from the PGA Tour thus far, in a lot of ways, and will in the future feature some other players, but kind of a light field. You had some over-the-hill players, if you will, and Ian Poulter, Graham McDowell, et cetera, Lee Westwood as well. And yet a champion in Charles Schwartzel hadn't won a tournament in several years, but just picked up $4 million. So a lot to absorb. What did you take away from last weekend?
I mean, with everything, there's good and bad. I mean, politically, and I'll keep this short, I disagree with it. But beyond that, they made their decision. All they need to say is, I did it for the money. Let's just be honest. That's the only reason why you do it. I mean, like you said, a lot of these golfers are past their prime, and realistically, they're not contending. So with, save for 1 week, even Phil Mickelson, who won last year's PGA, is pretty much a quadruple A baseball player right now. So would you rather grind to make the cut and make $40,000, or would you rather get a X amount million billion appearance fee? I mean, and every single week, even if you don't have your best stuff, you're walking out with at least $100,000. I mean, I did it for the money is popular, but for someone like Phil Mickelson, who says it reduces his appearance schedule, well, that's BS, because he's a lifetime member of the PGA Tour, and he said so himself. So he can play in one start for the whole season, and he's fine. He's a lifetime member. Nothing's going to change that. So for him to say anything short of I did it for the money is pure nonsense. The press asking questions the way they did, I mean, expect nothing different. I know that Alan Shipnuck and an AP reporter had some unfriendly experiences, although a little bit more friendly than that individual who shall not be named for political reasons a few years ago. But beyond that, the tournament itself, I'm personally not a fan of the shotgun start. Even if you're having a shotgun start, the rounds are still over 5 hours long, which is tough to hold any audience, regardless of the excitement factor. When you have 48 guys and a round is taking 5 hours, that's a little bit too much. There's definitely some things they have to work on, and now they're only getting more popular. I mean, already Pat Perez, Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Reed are hopping aboard. Presumably guys like Ricky Fowler, Jason Kokrak. I mean, Brooks Koepka didn't exactly endorse the PGA Tour in his press conference today necessarily either. So, I mean, people are paying attention to what's going on the tour, and regardless of excitement or not, which personally, it seems like an exhibition. There's no cut. It's a limited field. You have guys that you never maybe otherwise would have heard from or heard of that are being enticed by, let's face it, money and status. For amateur golfers such as James Piot, who I was fortunate enough to catch up with at Memorial the week prior, it's status. I mean, of course, the money doesn't hurt either, but if you're an amateur like James Piot, who's going to have to grind through, I don't know, a Latino American tour, maybe grind through a Corn Ferry tour, and in all of it, let's face it, in all of his PGA Tour starts, did not make any cuts. So I think he saw where he was. This was a good measuring stick for him, and now we're going to have to see what happens because, of course, as we'll touch on in question 2, for every reaction, there's an equal or opposite reaction. And I think that's hinting a little bit towards the next question. But beyond the scope of that, I think there's work to do. I wish the NBA and the NFL and the MLB would, I mean, the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB would take notes and have a draft where they only have 45 seconds to make their pick. That part was very, very nice. I mean, these guys generally know who's there and what to make of it. But I mean, was I watching on Sunday? Yeah, I was watching on Sunday. The leaderboard, I think for outsiders is a little bit confusing. You kind of have to know the players to know who's where. It almost looked more like a NASCAR Formula One kind of a leaderboard, which has its pros and cons, but you can't deny from a production value, you saw more shots from more golfers than you would have watched on any Golf Channel, NBC, or CBS broadcast. That would be the biggest plus that I've seen, and that is where if I'm a television rights holder, I'm taking notice where the don't blink thing was actually very good, and it wasn't necessarily always a make. When you watch a CBS telecast or an NBC telecast, and you see Matt Gajtka 6, 7, 8 shots off the lead, you know that if he's on 16, that he's either going to get a really good shot, he's going to hole it, or something's going to happen. Otherwise, you're not going to see it unless Matt Gajtka has won 15 majors or has won 40, 50 PGA Tour events. So the fact that LIV had the wherewithal on YouTube, which the rights thing is what it is, but you had a chance to get an audience, you had a chance to expose a lot of golf fans who got in using a promotion code just for free to have a chance to watch a tournament. Are they going to make their money back off of this? No, but it's absolutely a money play. It's a political play, and they're smart in that respect, that they're trying to find some goodwill, and that golf, of course, has been a booming industry in these last few years, one of the few positives out of the pandemic. It'll be interesting to see who flocks and who doesn't, especially now that the opposing stance is now known and the punishment in the future is now known. I mean, there's pros and cons with everything. There's definitely some good, but I mean, that would also be ignorant of the disrespect of a lot of people's stances. And from a PR perspective, having these players give canned coached answers also came off very disingenuous, and them saying the same thing so much, you could just tell they were just being overcoached. Just let them say, look, I came for the money. Well, fans, maybe they'll understand it. Will they respect it? That's up to them. I think some people's views are lock, stock, and barrel. But I mean, at least if the players say, I took it for the money, I took this for me and my family. I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, a lot more people will be a little bit more understanding of that. So there's definitely politics involved here. There's definitely some truth telling, some sports washing, for, as some people would say, that could be or may not be involved. I try to keep the politics personally out of things. For me, it was a first tournament. Any first is going to be rough and have constructive points. I mean, I don't even think the broadcast presentation was necessarily that great. The commentators didn't seem as well informed. They didn't seem to be as into it as maybe they should be. But maybe they didn't even know a lot of the guys in the field. But for a lot of America, I mean, Henny Duplessis, I mean, that's the first time a lot of people even heard that name. And here he is on the first page of a leaderboard. I want to find out a little bit more about this guy. And yeah, Schwartzel went wire to wire, but I mean, there was plenty of stories to be had, and I think they try, but I think there's some constructiveness. But how much goodwill is there going to be just from a pure golf perspective when the field was only growing and the knowledge seemed to be very waning as the week went on? So positives and negatives, I mean, a lot of people are just going to be set in their views for or against. Objectively, I think it needs a lot of work. It doesn't feel like a golf tournament yet. It may never with the no-cut event. I mean, we've seen no-cut events like the Bridgestone or things along that line where, yeah, you have the best players, which is something this did not have, and there's no cut. But I mean, pretty soon you're going to probably have to have a cut if these fields are going up a little bit. So a lot of tweaking that they're going to have to figure out, and they're going to have to keep people's interest fast. But we'll have to see. I mean, a lot of people didn't think the tour was going to get this far, and look, I mean, it's got one tournament in the books, and they've already committed to several more. So we'll just have to see where the chips fall and see what happens.
They're committed to 7 more this year, and they're also committed to spend multi-billions of dollars, many billions of dollars on this thing. It's an interesting study in economics, if nothing else, when you have a bottomless pocket and your cash reserve has no end, then you don't have to really follow many of the rules or any of the rules of profitability, certainly. So they can try some things. The broadcast had kind of a Fox-ish feel, I would say. You notice the microphones in the cups on all 18 holes. That was a carryover from the Fox US Open USGA days, which lasted about 5 years before they gave up that contract. Speaking of US Open week, and well, we covered a USGA event at Oakmont back in 2016 that was broadcast by Fox. I think it had some of that feel. In fact, going down to the shakiness, I would say at times, when it came to, like you would say, having enough on some of these players. But I think they can be excused considering the field consisted of quite a few no names, or at least guys that you maybe heard once or twice, and that's about it. So for me, the biggest problem was the quality of field, and it's going to get better. Just the question is how much better if we're just talking about purely on the golf side of things. And now it's going to come to the USA for 4 tournaments in a row, starting in Portland at the end of this month. So there's going to be at least one more barrage from the media in terms of tough questions and those Ari Fleischer coached answers that you love so much there, Zach. All right, shot number 2, you alluded to it. Couldn't have been a better weekend for the PGA Tour if they were trying to show, hey, we've still got a lot going for us. What we saw in Greater Toronto for the RBC Canadian Open, and speaking of entities that were vindicated, maybe RBC as well for sponsoring that after they cut ties with DJ, but I digress. It was a heck of a showdown on Sunday. Final group of Finau, JT, and the eventual winner, Rory McIlroy, got his 21st PGA Tour victory, as he was quick to remind after shooting lights out, 8 under, 62 in the final round. Justin Rose was hunting for 58, forget 59 for a while. So there were plenty of fireworks. Justin Thomas was right there, the defending PGA champion, and Tony Finau, who remains a fan favorite for many. He was knocking on the door too. And the crowds were awesome. I have to wonder if they were thinking, well, let's let the crowds walk up the 18th fairway, show exactly how popular the PGA Tour still is. And Jay Monahan himself putting on a PR offensive on the CBS broadcast with Jim Nantz and Nick Faldo. So it was all guns blazing in both orchestrated and unscripted ways. Zach, up in Canada in this lead into the US Open, the last PGA Tour event before the major. And so it felt like, to me, it couldn't have been a better weekend for the PGA Tour, even though ultimately it's going to be outgunned. And I question, in terms of finances, and I question Jay Monahan's hardline stance. I feel like at some point he's going to have to come to the negotiating table with Greg Norman and company and figure something out, because the PGA Tour just can't compete with the dollar figures that are being thrown out. And I would feel, if I were him, yes, you lean on tradition. You try to make it clear to the players that you're working for them, but the money talks the loudest. So I think at some point they're going to have to reach a hand across the aisle. At the same time, when you have guys like Rory and JT outspoken on your side, it can't hurt when you're going into a big golf week like this one.
Well, ultimately, it comes down to a battle here between money versus tradition and prestige. And I mean, this was a golf tournament. I mean, there was a cut, there was a field that was consistent with the level that you would expect from an event of this caliber. There, of course, was RBC frantically trying to tear down all of their Dustin Johnson signs they had just put up, maybe even more penalizing than the penalty he got at Oakmont Country Club. But regardless of that, it was a situation where the PGA Tour needed a response, and from the beginning, from Jay Monahan's letter, I mean, you've had JT and Rory both getting inundated with question after question about LIV. They know, and you know, that they're tired of being asked about it, but it's the elephant in the room. And it's interesting. I mean, they're all done at a set time, so that part of it is nice for them. And here the PGA Tour guys go off and they're teeing off at 8, they're teeing off at 1. I mean, there's not that consistency. So I mean, that's compelling too. But when you have a guy like Rory McIlroy not only win, but specifically immediately call out Greg Norman, he doubled down. He said it to Amanda Balionis Renner, whatever she goes by. Sorry, Amanda. And
just
he
Renner
did
now,
it right.
Yeah,
he did it right then and there. And immediately you go, did I think I just hear what I think I just hear? Frantically types down PGA Tour career wins and sees, yep, Greg Norman, 20 wins. Okay. And then, as if there was any doubt, when they had the actual press conference for the approved credentialed media that was covering the tournament got to crowd, and he said it right in his opening statement right there, which led to some awkward silence from Jack Ryan, the PGA Tour media relations guy at the podium. Poor Jack. But Jack's a really good guy. But it's difficult. But McIlroy immediately downplayed the heck out of winning that event on Saturday, despite the leaderboard that you mentioned in the Open here with this question, Matt. You have two very like-minded guys in the same group, and you have several of the top guys in the game threatening, knocking down the door. It was a tournament that looked like Rory had broken away from, but became very competitive because they were just encouraging each other with their birdie barrage on the front. I mean, as a viewer, what more could you possibly want than seeing guys make birdies, and those guys happening to be some of the lead guys on the course? I mean, beyond that, a guy with multiple bogeys almost shooting a 59. I mean, that's nuts. I mean, what a scorecard that had to be. So you have all of this unfolding at the exact same time. And then you have Jay Monahan smiling like a proud father and then saying, oh, you never had to ask questions about what tour you're on when you're with the PGA Tour. So, I mean, and it's true. I mean, over in London, you have media being given drinks by robots. You have golfers playing in 5-hour rounds. I mean, there's a lot of craziness attached to it. I mean, it even felt at times, was the media really being under control? I mean, who was PR? What was going on? They're picking really weird times to interject. I mean, PGA Tour has had that structure in place for quite some time, and LIV has a long way to go with it. But the letter that Jay Monahan had, specifically naming all of the members and putting asterisks in for who resigned their membership and who didn't, obviously that led to some disappointment, especially from the likes of Ian Poulter, the one person that didn't necessarily take the high road and might seem like he might want to fight it. I'm sure Phil Mickelson will be possibly joining him in that fight. But beyond that, I mean, here we are turning the page into the US Open, and there's a clear line in the sand, and there's a lot of guys that are in the middle. I mean, you would have assumed that Dustin Johnson was the guy staunchly on the PGA Tour side. Him and Bryson DeChambeau both loudly, boisterously early in the year said, we're PGA Tour guys. We're going to stay with the tour. But money talked, and they jumped the corner. I mean, Bryson's been at odds, I think, between his pace of play irritating a lot of the tour, his difference in approach irritating a lot of people. And I'm sure the amount of money that he was being given as a unique figurehead in the game, staunchly consistent in what he believes in, and always trying to find a way to stay a step ahead. And that those idiosyncratic methods were something that I think Greg Norman was looking for, because Bryson definitely has his fair share of fans. And now you're looking at a guy, I mean, Ricky Fowler, like I said earlier, the guy that we've talked about earlier on the show this year. I mean, let's face it, he's a guy that could very well jump too. I mean, nothing's promised after next season for him. And I mean, let's face it, he hasn't exactly lit up the course. I mean, he failed to qualify in sectionals for the US Open again this year. So that's a telltale sign of where his game is at. I mean, when Brooks Koepka basically Marshawn Lynch does the I'm here so I only get fined vibe at the press conference, I mean, you see him rapping ludicrous, and now he said, oh, I'm on the PGA Tour because until last week there wasn't an option. I mean, what does that tell you? I mean, if that doesn't tell you that he could potentially be joining his brother and him leaving the black cloud media ruining the US Open by there being a black cloud to say, oh, I wish my brother and his family the best. I mean, and taking the high road. I mean, you have to read between the lines a little bit. I mean, a lot of players are being offered a lot of money to jump, and the temptation is finally there. I mean, the only regular event overseas the guys typically play is the Scottish Open on the DP World Tour at this point in time, because it's that lead into the Open Championship. It lets them get used to the weather, used to course conditions, used to links golf, so to speak. So it's different, but in a sense, right now, the division between these two, what to me does it come down to? It comes down to the majors. And will these majors allow the LIV Golf individuals to get in? And the US Open has said, at least for this year, that players that have earned their way have earned their way. It's an open. It comes down to the Masters, really. I mean, how much of a tradition are we going to get like no other? I mean, you have multiple guys: Sergio Garcia, Masters champion; Dustin Johnson, Masters champion; Phil Mickelson, Masters champion. Presumably, Bubba Watson's going to potentially be joining this tour, Masters champion. So on and so forth. You have
Charles
guys
Schwartzel.
that have Charles Schwartzel, $4.0 million in Masters champion. I mean, you go down the line. It's like a shopping list. And the understanding is guys that have won the Masters can play for the rest of their lives or however long they see fit. And presumably, obviously, they're going to want to play and have that honor. But if the Masters lets these guys play, then it could set a very much a precedent where a lot of guys go, well, the majors are letting me play, the Masters are letting me play, the US Open's letting me play. I mean, PGA is the PGA. I mean, whatever they want to do, they can do. And I mean, the Open, some guys just don't travel to the Open anyways because they don't feel their game plays some. That's been, at least that was the case in the mid 2000s. So I mean, it's not unheard of. So if guys can still play the majors and have that open access as two of them suggest, then I mean, there's not necessarily going to be as much punishment. I mean, even right now, you see LIV Golf guys going to apply for the DP World Tour and see if they're willing to try their hand over there. And if they're going to be welcome there, then I mean, imagine how much those attendance is going to grow if you know that Dustin Johnson's going to play at your tournament. You're bound to at least get a few more fans to do that way. So right now, we're kind of in the Monday Night Wars, as the wrestling fans would like to know right now. We've got a little bit of a battle at the OK Corral, and now we're going to find out who has more ammo.
At least on the money side, LIV has more ammo, but the PGA Tour does have tradition. It does have inertia as well. Never underestimate the power of just keep doing what you're doing, and how easy that can be at times for guys. You mentioned the DP World Tour. Just one quick note here. There's been nothing from Keith Pelley, the CEO of the DP World Tour, formerly known as the European Tour, for those traditional golf fans out there. There is speculation that the DP Tour may partner with LIV and say, hey, all you guys got to do is play 4 tournaments for us, and you're good to go. And then they would be in good standing on that tour. And one would presume that would open them up to playing in all the majors. So it's a very interesting situation, and it continues to develop by the hour, by the minute. In fact, as we continue to see the players roll through for their media responsibilities prior to the US Open. And I always thought it made a lot of sense for Brooks Koepka to go to LIV, because there's a guy who doesn't care about anything but the majors and making money. And if he can play the majors, or even 3 out of 4, I think he would certainly make the jump. All right, shot number 3 as we approach the green here at Brookline, in Brookline at the Country Club. Phil Mickelson didn't say a whole lot. We said a lot of words on Monday in Boston, Zach, but not a lot of meaning there. He is certainly taking the no comment approach, not in so many words, but you know what I mean, when it comes to answering questions about the controversial nature of the financial backing of the LIV Tour and his decision to go ahead and join after he stepped away from golf and from the public spotlight for roughly 4 months. He seems a more serene Phil Mickelson, certainly not one who's going to be picking a fight in the media anytime soon. In fact, he directly said that he made mistakes, as he called them, when it came to calling out entities like the USGA and the PGA Tour in the past, doing that in the public eye. So it looks like it's going to be a more discreet Phil, or at least that's his intention as of right now, a more thoughtful Phil Mickelson. I'm not sure golf fans win when we have Phil less off the cuff, because personally, I went from not really liking Phil that much and finding him inauthentic to being a big Phil fan over the past 5 years, as he just basically let fly in all ways in his life, and then went ahead and won the PGA Championship last year. It seemed like the peak of Phil. And well, now he is still in the public eye, but in a very different way. And I'm going to go check out that Alan Shipnuck biography, by the way. Looks like it's a lot of fun, and some great stories, good and bad, on Lefty. What do you make of the new Phil? And do you think this different perspective or outward projection from him lasts longer than, say, a couple of weeks before he digs into the LIV Tour schedule this summer?
I mean, I think what you're going to get is what you're going to get. I mean, if you're being paid millions and millions of dollars with the condition to shut the heck up, then you're going to take the money and shut the heck up. And I think Phil's a calculating enough and smart enough guy to know that he said some things that have damaged his reputation over the years in a lot of fans' eyes. And I think he realizes that, you know, there's fans with this announcement that he's just not going to get back. And he has to face that reality and take that head on. And I think that, like he said, he's going to be more measured. I think he gave you a little bit by saying, yes, I gambled, I'm sorry about it, but I also have been comfortable enough with my money and am aware enough to know that I didn't gamble anything that was going to put my family in any financial turmoil. Now, will Phil have the same approach when the insider trading book comes out and a chapter that's supposedly going to be about him comes out? That remains to be seen. And that's going to be something that he's going to have to face. I mean, as is, he has some stubble on his face now. He's definitely taken the time, and possibly he's taken it hard. I mean, obviously he's had some vacation time, but I mean, how much of that therapy is therapy and how much of that therapy was a coaching session where we're saying, hey, Phil, I mean, we understand how you feel, what you do, but right now you're a member of this tour and you just need to follow the company line. I mean, he was playing in a pro-am this past week with the guy that was financing all of the money. And obviously there were handshakes and hugs on the podium when Phil got up there for the draft. So obviously if Phil was objecting to all of this, then you wouldn't be seeing Phil so happy. I mean, he's still flashing his trademark thumbs up, but I think right now you're going to see, as long as Phil's a member of this tour, you're going to see him be measured and grounded. Now, what will happen with this Billy Walters book? I'm sure you're going to get a lot of media that's going to get credentialed just to try to get gotcha journalism, right or wrong. And obviously Phil has made some mistakes, and this was something that was in the news around the Memorial Tournament several years back. But now, I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, it's clear right now that until the legal system does what it needs to do, that Phil Mickelson, save for the majors, will not be welcomed back on the PGA Tour. That much has been made clear by Jay Monahan, and it's a very loud stance, but it's a consistent stance. And Phil has made his decision as well. I mean, right now he's got 8 events that he's committed to, plus any majors that he wants to play in, of which he's already sat out the first couple here. So he's got the Masters he missed, and he missed the PGA Championship. So we'll have to see if he wants to tee it up at the Open Championship, but that'd be 10 tournaments that we see Phil this year. Obviously right now it does no President's Cup or anything along the lines of that as well either. It was also interesting to see the stances. Obviously Kevin Na was the first player to resign from the PGA Tour and did so during Memorial Weekend. It was quite a bit of talk in the media room itself when it happened. Even some of the tour representatives were aware of it and whispered a little bit. I mean, word goes around, and I mean, it's definitely eye-catching. I mean, that was the public one. Everybody else, save for Dustin Johnson, kind of did it where it was a little bit more discreet, where it was, yeah, I resigned from the tour, or just in Graham McDowell's case, literally 30 minutes before he teed off, he must have received an inside word that the hammer was about to be dropped. But like we've said, I mean, it's interesting. Like it or not, the face of golf now is interesting. The Beatles were talking about money can't buy me love, but we're about to find out what money can buy. And we're about to figure out what all that entails. So, I mean, exciting or not, I mean, it's definitely interesting, however you want to interpret that. If you're not intrigued, then I think you're fooling yourself. I mean, money wise or not, it's still interesting to see what they're doing and to see how successful it is. I think legitimate success and financial success should be categorized in different ways, but we've seen one tournament now. It's hard to drop a hammer just on one tournament. Beliefs are beliefs, which I've mentioned earlier, but it will be interesting to see when the dust settles, when we have a second tournament here towards the end of the month, what all that entails, how many more people jump, and what goes on from there. So I think you'll see if there's more stability, you might see more and more fringe guys jump. You have to see if amateurs with these fields starting to strengthen, if they're brought over or if their financial terms are a little bit less successful to be brought over. And if they accept it because it's a pathway towards quicker exposure where they don't have to toil in Corn Ferry, where they're wondering where their next meal might potentially come from. A conversation we also had when we talked about our buddy Grayson Murray. So it's drink up. If you thought 3 Grayson Murray name references in 3 of these different episodes this year, then congratulations, you win. But in all seriousness, it's true. I mean, Corn Ferry, we've talked about, there's been some trouble. There's clearly not going to be any trouble. And LIV has also been taking care of the caddies as well, which is also something that perhaps the PGA Tour has been a little bit lax with. I mean, the relationship between the PGA Tour and its caddies has not always been chummy. So for caddies to say that they're being treated well here, word of mouth travels fast. And if you're a caddy, you might be interested in making the jump, maybe even more than your players. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this shapes up from all different sides. So it'll be interesting. It won't be something that'll be solved tomorrow, but we'll have to see what all gets transpired.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll finally get to the U.S. Open here as maybe the strongest field in golf this year, in men's golf at least, converges on Boston. And I don't know if you've seen some of the Gil Hanse renovations there, Zach, but he's made the greens a little bit bigger. They're notoriously small greens, and they're still quite small, but it's an old-fashioned look to the golf course. It's not overly manicured. There are rock outcroppings throughout the golf course. It's kind of a tighter property, obviously being in the greater Boston area. You're not going to have all sorts of room to stretch out. And of course, you're looking forward to seeing the Northeast get another shot at hosting the U.S. Open. Actually, New England for the first time in a long time that the USGA's flagship men's event comes to town. And as far as I'm concerned, looking at players who are playing well, it's hard to say that Justin Thomas wouldn't be at least your co-favorite at this point. One of the game's preeminent ball strikers, maybe the preeminent ball striker right now, along with Jon Rahm and Collin Morikawa. Those are guys you think about when it comes to the U.S. Open. At least that's how I look at it. If you were talking fairways and greens and that sort of thing, the traditional way to think about the U.S. Open. But the greens also look difficult once you get on there, and that might actually be the most challenging part, is navigating some of those undulations. So as usual, the course has plenty of teeth, some graduated rough again, so it's not going to be totally a hack it out type of a situation if you just go a few yards off the fairway. But I don't think we're going to see guys light it up a la Aaron Hills either. So as far as difficulty, might be a middle of the road U.S. Open, but compared to the typical tour stop, of course, then you would certainly put it as one of the more difficult tests of the year, if not the most difficult. Are there any other players that you're thinking about, not Grayson Murray, as far as their chances of at least contending and making it interesting on the weekend at the Country Club?
Well, I think the U.S. Open, the idea is that it's open, and they're trying to counteract that distance with a little bit of narrowness. I can't tell you how many times that it was referenced by Jack Nicklaus during the weekend at Memorial Tournament. I mean, Billy Horschel had a big lead, and Horschel referenced this too. Fairways, and then just hitting the middle of the green and trusting your instincts to make 2 putts. And if you play smart, borderline defensive golf, then you have a shot this week. I mean, it's knowing where to miss. That's where the note taking and the practice rounds really come into play. knowing your pin placements, knowing where the right side to miss is. I mean, who's been playing decent golf? I think Shane Lowry's been a sneaky pick, but of course, Shane Lowry is probably my pick to win Memorial, and that panned out. But
he has been good, though. He's been very good. Yeah.
He's been very good. Matt Fitzpatrick's another one that's obviously been good. I mean, you have so many names
there. Yeah.
I mean, you have so many names. I mean, Davis Riley just got through sectionals. He's been a guy that's been going through. I mean, so many of the guys. That's the thing, too, about these majors being so close now. I mean, you could honestly just take the first page of the leaderboard of the PGA and said, yep, this guy's got a shot. Yep, this guy's got a shot. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, you peak for the majors, but at this point with the majors so tightly contested together, it's just about keeping your form and holding your nerve. And if you do that, then you stand a good shot. So that's really all that it boils down to. Winner pick, I pass.
That's fine.
The course.
Yeah. Hey, when it's the U.S. Open, that is probably the best pick to make. Although, like I said, I think we're going to see something around 7 or 8 under. That'd be my prediction. Maybe the more interesting thing is what's the final score? What's the winner's score, I should say, this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 8. What are you going to go with?
I'm going to say 10.
Okay. Double digits. Not too common in the U.S. Open, but like I said, it has happened. And it's not going to be a lighted up type of situation. The wind, first of all, we talked about the wind at the PGA Championship. That was a big deal at Southern Hills. It was quite cold there, in fact, over the weekend. It's going to be warm in Boston, relatively speaking, but the wind's going to be over 10 to 15 miles an hour each of the final 3 days, I think it is predicted. So maybe early in the week, you can try to get something accomplished and then hold on for dear life. Like I said, the greens are tough to hit, and that may be the biggest moment. In the tournament is someone who's in and around the lead needing to absolutely put it on the green and not leave themselves a difficult chip to a heavily sloped putting surface. So there you go. We're looking forward to it. The broadcast will be spread across the NBC family networks, the Peacock streaming system, as well as USA Network, and then NBC proper. Remember, it is back on NBC for, I think, now the 3rd consecutive year. Zach, great chatting with you. Like I said, golf, I don't think has ever been more interesting. It may also not have ever been more splintered than it is right now, but I suppose we'll take what we can get.
Well, sure. And I think that when you have a course like this that people remember from maybe 99 with the Ryder Cup and maybe haven't necessarily played, maybe it'll be a little bit friendlier on the setup, and maybe you'll see guys taking more risks trying to figure the course out. So maybe that's where the 10 under comes from. But interesting golfing weekend. Obviously, would love to get your guys' thoughts on LIV versus PGA Tour, what you liked about LIV, what you disliked, and what you liked from Canada, and maybe even a U.S. Open pick. Maybe Matt and I'll stick our heads together, maybe come up with a little small prize for somebody that picks the winner in the score, which good luck getting the score right.
Yeah, there you go. Comment below, as they say, and like and subscribe to Pittsburgh Sports Live. There it is right behind me. For Zac Weiss, I'm Matt Gajtka. This has been the PGN Par 4. Enjoy the golf, and we'll talk to you next month. I'm sure there's going to be plenty to talk about at that point if the last month is any gauge. So long.